What if the most important transformation in Silo right now is not Juliette getting her memory back, but Robert Sims quietly deciding he is done being a weapon for people who will never truly trust him? Because after this episode, that is the thread I cannot stop thinking about. Juliette is remembering. Charlotte is being chemically rewritten in the past. Helen and Daniel are stumbling into something way bigger than they understand. But the person who may actually break the whole machine from the inside is Sims. And if that happens, this season stops being only about hidden truth and starts becoming about what people do once they finally see how the system really works. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Breakdown Epic. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Today, we are breaking down Silo Season 3, Episode 4, because in my opinion, this is the strongest episode of the season so far. And it works because all the major storylines finally start talking to each other. Not literally, but structurally. Juliette's suppression, Charlotte's treatment, Helen and Daniel's conspiracy trail, Billings' moral collapse, Sims and Camille's marriage, all of it is now orbiting the same question. Once you know the truth, what does that actually let you change? And the scariest answer this episode gives is maybe not much. Let's start with Sims, because the old version of him would have let Juliette die without blinking. That is what makes his choice here so important. This was a man who spent years justifying monstrous things by calling them necessary. He believed in survival through obedience. He believed the silo had to come first. He believed order mattered more than innocence. But this episode shows us the final stage of his disillusionment. First, Bernard kept him out of the inner circle.
Then the algorithm chose Camille instead of him. And now, even while he understands exactly why Juliette has to disappear for the system to stay stable, he cannot quite stomach what that requires anymore. So when he offers to help Camille, it reads like support on the surface, but under it there is something else: resentment, exhaustion, and maybe even the beginning of refusal. That becomes obvious the second he turns on Emerson's plan and lets the nurse knock out the enforcer instead of Juliette. He is not rebelling loudly yet. He is doing something more dangerous. He is making selective moral choices inside a system built on total control. And those kinds of cracks are how empires fall. Now, rewind for a second and look at Camille, because she is just as important here, maybe more. She is the one the algorithm chose. She is the one carrying the burden of knowing that if Juliette remembers too much, the Great Reset could become unavoidable. She knows the graph. She knows the timeline. She knows the logic. And that is what makes her terrifying. She does not need to hate Juliette to destroy her. She just needs to believe that erasing one person is better than erasing everyone. In my opinion, that is what makes Camille one of the most interesting characters on the show right now. She is not cruel for the sake of cruelty. She is dangerous because she can rationalize almost anything if it protects her version of order. That's also why Sims and Camille may be heading toward a collision. The algorithm respects her more than him. He sees it. He feels it.
And now he is being asked to live in a world where the woman beside him has become more essential to the machine than he is. That is not going to sit quietly forever. Fragments, a feeling, a face, a name, a sense of distrust that keeps intensifying. That is so much better than just flipping a switch and having her suddenly remember everything. The George moment works because it is emotional, not informational. Surely pushing her toward the Digger Vault helps too, because it reminds us that memory in Silo is not just a technical process. It is tied to people, places, and relationships. The medication blocks access, but lived experience keeps trying to break back through. That is why the note mattered. That is why the helmet mattered. And that is why Bernard matters now more than ever. Juliette going down to him is not just about answers. It is about confronting the one man who knew enough to explain what she saw, what she forgot, and why she was ever allowed to come back at all. And honestly, if Bernard is as weak as he looks, that conversation could end up being less useful than she hopes. But it still matters symbolically, because Juliette is now choosing truth over safety. She is done performing peace. Now let's go to the older timeline, because wow, this conspiracy is getting ugly fast. Helen and Daniel are now far enough inside this thing that the story stops feeling like normal political secrecy and starts feeling like active containment. The mystery man showing up again confirms that Charlotte was not just unlucky, not just watched casually, but likely tracked as part of a much larger operation. That is what makes the Cloud and Crash story feel so different now. It is no longer just, what was that thing in the sky? It is, who knew it was there, and why did they let those pilots fly into it anyway? And the answer may be right in front of us. Daniel, or at least the version of Daniel this world is trying to create. That is where the episode gets really unsettling, because Daniel is still recognizably human. He loves his sister. He wants to help. He still reacts emotionally, but every scene pushes him a little closer to the kind of compromise that eventually becomes policy. The books, the Cloud, the hidden motives behind the Iran mission, the weirdly outdated systems, the questions around the dirty bomb itself, all of it is making one thing clearer. This was never just a response to disaster. It may have been the design of a new kind of control from the start. And if Daniel's drill tech and political access become part of the silo's origin, then the real tragedy of his story is that he may help build the thing that destroys every value he thought he was protecting. Now, let me lock in a prediction here. I think the algorithm is not literally Daniel Keene, but I absolutely think it is tied to the same worldview he may eventually help enshrine. Sacrifice truth to preserve order. Rewrite memory to preserve stability. Treat people like variables if the system survives. That is not just one doctor's logic or one senator's logic. That is an ideology. And if Daniel crosses that moral line willingly, he becomes one of the most important origin figures in the whole show. Now let's talk about Billings, because his arc here might be the most quietly heartbreaking one in the episode. He is trapped in a role he no longer believes in, enforcing rules that now feel hollow, while his wife and the outsider movement pull him emotionally in the opposite direction. The Orla Kent investigation matters because it gives him a place to put that tension. He knows things are wrong. He knows the body was moved. He knows Supply is hiding something. And the more he pulls that thread, the harder it becomes to keep acting like the pact means anything. In my opinion, Billings is reaching the point where pretending becomes more dangerous than choosing. He may not have made the turn yet, but the turn is coming. And once he stops obeying the committee honestly, then Silo 18 does not just have a rebellion problem, it has a law problem. Now let's do the what if, because this episode practically begs for it. What if Juliette is not the real trigger for the Great Reset at all? What if the trigger is the combination of Juliette remembering, Billings doubting, Sims drifting, Kennedy resisting, and the old world truth starting to point toward the silos not as a shelter, but the permanent extension of a lie? Because if all of those threads snap at once, then the reset becomes less a response to one rebellious mayor and more the system's panic button for itself. That is where the title of the season really starts to bite.
The silo is not trying to protect people from what is outside. It may be trying to protect itself from what people would become if they ever fully understood what it really is. Before I finish, here is the fast-fire breakdown of what matters most. Sims is not loyal the way he used to be. Camille is terrifying because she truly believes the logic of erasure. Juliette is rebuilding memory through emotion and place, not just clues. Bernard still matters, even broken. Helen and Daniel are now in active danger. The mystery man is not background dressing, he is evidence. Billings is one emotional shove away from turning. And the Great Reset now feels less theoretical and more like the system's next move if all this pressure keeps building. So overall, this episode is fantastic because it does not just deepen the mystery, it deepens the moral trap underneath the mystery. Everyone now knows just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be free. And that makes Episode 5 incredibly important. But anyway, that is my breakdown of Silo Season 3, Episode 4, and why I think the most important story in this episode is not Juliette remembering, It is the people around her starting to realize what remembering will cost. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Sims is actually changing, or is this just one temporary crack before he slides right back into the machine? I will catch you in the next one.